Welcome to episode 159 of the Half Point Per Podcast, live on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Tonight, I am your host, Evan Riggs, joined, as always, by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and producer, Johnny Pham. We've got a pretty fun show coming up. If anybody remembers the Trick or Treat show we did last year, I'll explain the rules for all of you and for Dalton as well later on, just to make sure that everybody understands it. We've also got a little Who's That Pokemon. Dalton, do you remember to bring Who's That Pokemon for the show tonight?
Oh, I got a Pikachu for you.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. Thanks for just giving that away. And yep, that will be the show tonight. But as always, Johnny, we got to start with asking Dalton about any swim lesson updates. Although, Johnny, I like the little over the shoulder, like little shelf, some stuff on the shelf. I don't think that was there last time. Yep, and on the window, looking good.
It was not. It was a lot of things have been unboxed. Discovering new things that we've had, and I haven't looked at those in a while. But yeah, we got some decorations out. But yeah, it's starting to come together here.
When's the unboxing video?
Talk about your swim lessons, please.
Well, for those who didn't know, I missed last Tuesday, and I was sick all weekend, so I missed.
Do you get fined for not going to classes?
No. We did have a person who came to the first one and was so deathly afraid of water. She has not been seen since.
I feel like Dalton skipping last Tuesday is kind of like Anthony Richardson subbing himself out on third down. Really got to question Dalton's
he's a breather
here going forward.
It was my girlfriend's birthday.
Oh, so you weren't sick then?
Well, that was Tuesday. Your math is not mathing. Update from Tuesday. I'm the only one. No one else is coming anymore. So we had a crotchety older man who swore he could swim, and then when asked to swim, couldn't swim. And he has since stopped returning. And then we had the deathly afraid of water. So they are one-on-one swim lessons, and we are now at the point where she just says swim laps and then kind of yells stuff at me occasionally. So it's pure 30, 40 minutes of swimming up and down, and that is very exhausting.
I really want that old man to come back, because I'm imagining like the New Girl scene with Nick and oh my God, what's the old Asian guy's name that he's friends with who never speaks? But the scene where he's holding
the water.
Yeah, when he's holding Nick in the water like a baby. Oh man. All right. To keep with the Halloween theme of the trick or treat, I thought I would update the people on a little something we talked about last year that I did not remember until I was going back to double check for myself how exactly we did trick or treat. I don't know if you guys remember, we talked about gobstoppers quite a bit last year, and my realization that you could not really buy them in stores anymore. So I have two updates for you. One of them old, one of them new. I've only found gobstoppers not in a bag of Halloween candy at one store in the last year. It was at a Hallmark store in Kansas City. They have just random gobstoppers in this store.
Is it like how big is it? Like one of those?
They're the really narrow boxes. So made them last as long as I could, which was not very long. The other option,
you can stock up and get multiple, so that's on you.
It's just like for the size of the box, it just wasn't. And that was quite a while ago. That was like April, but I just remembered that now. So the actual update, I don't know if you remember the second way that I told you that you can actually still get gobstoppers now, and that's on Amazon. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can buy, and this is still the case this year, one individual box for $5, which is insane. Or you can buy a 12-pack for about $16.
$15.12.
So
let's go.
Oh my God.
What a deal.
We have a box right over here on the bookshelf. We got a box at my office at work in a drawer, and we have 10 more waiting in the wings. We'll see if I finish this this big box of gobstoppers before the NFL season, but just thought I would update on the Halloween candy pursuit there.
Okay, candy is surprisingly cheap on Amazon.
Yeah, no, and buying in bulk and anything is cheaper, but yeah, It is definitely, especially if you look at like how much Halloween candy costs in the store, it's ridiculous.
I get a pound bag of butterscotch discs.
Whenever you order stuff on Amazon, like candy like that, like you know what the ounces mean. Because I thought I got the best deal ever on like lemon heads. I thought they were gonna be like those size of those gobstoppers, but it was like the little Halloween squares. And I was like,
Oh,
but still ate them, but thought they'd be way more for how much I paid.
honestly, I probably caught a lucky break with that one. Wasn't really paying too close of attention, other than that it was a 12-pack for $15. And I was like,
yeah, it literally said 24-pack for $12. I was like, oh my god, this is insane. I have to buy it.
Before we move on to fantasy football, Johnny, how many ounces are in a pound?
16.
Well, how did you screw this up?
What do you? It literally, because I just didn't look at it. It was just pure excitement of having lemon heads back in my life because I used to get them at Dollar Tree in Lawrence.
Yeah,
$1.
No, we've all been there. This reminds me.
Yeah, don't shame me.
Have to speak quietly so Alex doesn't hear me. When we lived in Iowa, she one time ordered 2 nightstands for our bedroom and assembled them, and they were, let's just say, much shorter than she anticipated. So we had to send them back because there was like physically no way that we could even hardly reach them from our bed. And our bed's not like that high up. It's like a normal, excluding Dalton, like normal height off the ground.
That's fair. Yeah. See, like measurements are hard, and Dalton wants to shame people for it. But you know what? I digress, and we can move on from sizing.
Yeah, Dalton's the last person who wants to talk about how tall something is. So I'm sure he's eager to move on. Johnny, any trick or treaters on the horizon in New York City? I mean, I feel like it's probably a pretty different vibe than what we've had.
I have no idea. We do know that children do live in our building, but we don't know if we need to have candy or if people are gonna go by. I mean, we do live on the 5th floor, so I don't know if kids are running all the way up there or if I have no idea. I think they kind of do similar to like a trunk or treat, but just at like a park instead of like a parking lot. I think they just go to a park and just run around, and I think that's it, but we'll find out tomorrow, which is kind of crazy. Tomorrow's Halloween.
Yeah, we've got the bags of candy ready. As you guys know, Alex goes all out for that.
All out since August.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Although we've had to have the Halloween decorations down outside the last couple of days because of how freaking windy it's been here. But neither here nor there. Let's get into trick or treat. Who's that Pokemon? Real quick, I'm going to explain what the trick or treat actually is. We did this last year, doing it again this year. It is just kind of like the Halloween version of buy or sell, and we're going to have a couple of different topics we're going to hit on. And trick is bad, treat is good. Okay, got that out of the way. Now back to who's that Pokemon, which we have not done one of these during the season this year. So if you haven't been with us since before the season, who's that Pokemon? I mean, we all remember the drop during Pokemon episodes.
Who's that Pokemon?
And then Dalton and I just read off stats or whatever, talk about the profile of a player, and we try to guess who that player is. Johnny, if you want to hop in for that part of it, you're more than welcome, but up to you on that one. Dalton, I will let you give us your Pokemon first. Of course, have to play drop one more time.
Who's that Pokemon?
This is a wide receiver.
Okay.
He's in the AFC. Over the last 2 weeks, he's 3rd in the NFL in air yards with 286, 7th in the NFL in receiving yards with 180, and 5th in the NFL in end zone targets with 3. Who is that Pokemon?
Brian Thomas.
No, that is a good guess, though.
High air yards. AFC. Is this like Calvin Ridley just jumped up into these categories last week?
No, although this player did just jump up into these categories last 2 weeks. So you are factually correct that this player did just jump.
George Pickens?
No.
Yes.
This player was not a first-round draft pick.
He was a what?
He was a 3rd-round draft pick.
in NFL draft or fantasy drafts?
NFL.
Third round draft
He
pick.
probably
NFL
went
draft.
undrafted in any of the leagues you were in.
And it wasn't Lad McConkey like Johnny just said.
Lad was second. This is third.
So he's a third round NFL, but is he a rookie?
No.
But not the rookie. Okay.
He's
Then
the
the
second
third
year.
Okay, second year, third round.
Played in a Mickey Mouse college offense.
Played Mickey Mouse. Well, not Jalen Hyatt. He's in the NFC.
You're close.
Oh, Cedric Tillman.
It is Cedric
Man,
Tillman.
he's jumped up that high in the last 2 weeks. That's crazy.
Yeah. And he's also sixth in air yards over the last 2 weeks, 143. He has gone insane. But yes, Cedric Tillman is hitting lately. And with the way Jameis played against the bad Ravens defense, it's very exciting. That offense has come to life.
Yeah, I mean, Jameis has definitely breathed life back into this offense. And we will talk about the Browns a little bit more later with a Nick Chubb topic. So that'll be exciting. Okay, my Pokemon.
Who's that Pokemon?
Okay, this player is a running back in the NFC. He scored 18 or more fantasy points in 4 straight games, and he's inside the top 20 overall at the position, and he's actually top 15 in points per game. He has a higher explosive run rate and lower negative run rate, so breaks big plays and has fewer bad plays than Breece Hall this year. On pace for about 1,600 total yards and 9 total touchdowns. And he's played in about 5% less of his team's snaps, but handled 4% more of his team's rushing attempts than Bijan Robinson has this year. So kind of a pretty workhorsey type of profile here. Who's that Pokemon?
Chuba Hubbard.
No, not Chuba Hubbard.
Is it Alvin Kamara?
No, not Alvin Kamara. In the NFC, I feel like Dalton's going to be unhappy when I unveil the identity of this player. That's another hint. No, not Kenneth Walker. You'd be happy. We like Kenneth Walker.
Jameer Gibbs.
No, not Jameer
like
Gibbs.
There's no way he's handled that much.
No, Jameer Gibbs. I actually was going to compare this player to Gibbs. I looked at Gibbs' profile. I think Gibbs was like 53% of the snaps, 47% of the team's rush attempts. And he's still like RB5.
What division?
NFC North.
It's not Aaron Jones.
No. I mean, you've only got 3 teams left now, so.
I know. Johnny?
DeAndre Swift.
Yes, it is DeAndre Swift.
Oh, God.
After a slow start to the season, DeAndre Swift has been, 18 or more points in 4 straight weeks. Now, we've seen Swift have these stretches, but he's been downright impressive for the last month. And, if not for his incredible run the other day, that game doesn't even get to a Hail Mary at the end with Washington and Chicago. But he scored a touchdown to, I think, get them on the board. In the third quarter, they were being shut out for 2.5 quarters. But yeah, DeAndre Swift, after I would say a rough start to the season, I think he was single digits for the first month. And it kind of felt like, okay, I like this backfield. I just don't really trust anybody. And, Khalil Herbert hasn't done anything. Rashawn Johnson, not a factor for fantasy. It's been all DeAndre Swift.
Hasn't been given an opportunity to do anything.
Hey, no disagreements here, but facts are facts. He has not done anything.
True. Oh, that is crazy. He's been off to a wild start. Well, he's been off to a very DeAndre Swift boom or bust start. He's just had booms and booms and booms. I'll be interested to see how that offense continues to thrive because I still am pretty out on Shane Waldron running it on.
I'm extremely out on Shane Waldron.
To a lineman, to a backup offensive lineman on a 4th and 1.
And I not even I don't even know if it's just a backup. I still follow quite a few Bears fans from my days in Iowa. I have it on good authority from a pretty big Bears fan. That may have been the third string center. Not even the second, the third string center.
Love that. Well, it looks like we've got a question here in chat from Mark Grefford. Should he trade Waddle and Addison or Addison and Tracy for Olave? I would honestly do.
I'd rather have Waddle than Olave, I think.
Yeah, but I would do
Straight up.
Addison and Tracy for Olave.
Yeah, I would do Addison and Tracy for Olave.
I like
for sure.
what Tyrone Tracy's put on tape, but the problem with Tyrone Tracy is he plays for the New York Giants, and he will have good weeks, and he's going to have terrible weeks just because of how the offense does, and he's really relying on being explosive and not being first of mind for a lot of defenses, and I think that could change.
We were really teetering on not me having a meltdown about Chris Olave, but just me being very upset about Chris Olave because he obviously missed last week, had negative points the week before because he got hurt on a play where he fumbled the ball, got a concussion on that play. And then I got the alert at the very beginning of that game the other day that he already was in the blue medical tent and he had one catch for 15 yards. It's like, great. There's just 3 weeks of his season just lost. Same old crap with Chris Olave, but he came back in, had over 100 yards. I think you're getting Derek Carr back this week. It sounds like 2, which, I mean, I don't know volume-wise if that's better or worse for Olave, but just offense-wise, that'll be better. And there's no Rashid Shaheed. So you would think they're going to have to dial up some more deep shots for Chris Olave, who is very, very capable of doing it. He may not be quite as fast as Shaheed, but he's very fast, and he has made way more highlight catches down the field than Shaheed, who is just more so in the ilk of like toasting guys down the field.
Yeah. No, I like getting Olave. He's in for just major volume going forward regardless, and doesn't sound like they're going to blow it up in New Orleans, even though they should. They
time is a flat circle in New Orleans. Dalton, I know you're not in the Instagram, but we do have a comment from Brian Clark Brian _ Clark 237. Connor Officer is a dumb name. Just passing that one along. One more question before we get into our trick or treat here. Trade Josh Allen and David Montgomery for Saquon. He has Dak as his backup, or could add Stroud or Tua from waivers. PPR. He's 5-3. He has Achane, Gibbs, Montgomery at running back. Receivers are Garrett Wilson, Jaden Reed, T. Higgins, Diontae, and Khalil Shakir. I mean, the team honestly seems pretty set. I still have. I think I would do that. I think I would do that for Saquon. I think I ranked Saquon as my number 1 player last week. I think if I truly believe that, which I do, I think I have to say yes, even though it pains me a little bit to downgrade at quarterback that much. But I do think that for CJ Stroud, better days are ahead. And that is, out of those quarterbacks that he named, that's the guy that I would want as my starting quarterback going forward.
I would do it as well. Josh Allen hasn't been the monster QB1 that we've seen so far this year. And part of that's just they're a way heavier rush rate team, and they've played some weird games so far. But quarterbacks aren't really going to win you like your fantasy league in most situations. But Saquon Barkley, the way he's playing right now, could. And you're giving up Monty, but Saquon also already came off his bye, so you don't have to worry about any of that bye week nonsense. And then Saquon and Achane is a pretty salty 1-2 with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Well, I said Jahmyr Gibbs is probably the 2, and Achane is the flex. Which, if before the season you told me, hey, you can have Devon Achane as your flex, I'd say, yeah, I feel a lot better about that week to week uncertainty than if he's my RB1 or RB2. Even you feel pretty solid about that. This is really mostly antagonizing, but it does at least lead us into something we can talk about here. Cedric Tillman, Brian _ Clark 237 wants to know our thoughts on Cedric Tillman. Seems like fool's gold to me. Seems like he can win you a lucky game, apparently, but not a league, is what Brian says. And obviously he was the who's that Pokemon for you earlier, Dalton. So you have all the air yards and all of those numbers for Tillman through the last couple of weeks and through the season. But I mean, just the fact that we had Jameis Winston, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, it's like the only thing I'm really interested in this receiver room is, can we get Cedric Tillman on the field? I mean, like, maybe Jerry Judy's a little bit interesting now. He sneakily played pretty well the other day too. But I liked Tillman as a prospect. We haven't seen much in the NFL, but I do like what we've seen the last couple of weeks as a big X receiver who's not going to kill you, not going to burn you with routes, but can just get open and make plays. And we know Jameis has no problem throwing into contested areas.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of him coming out. I thought he could have been the one to win the Blitnikoff out of Tennessee over Hyatt, but he had an injury in the middle of the season. If you go back 2 years ago and look, he outproduced Hyatt in every game. They were both healthy. And then when he went down is when Jalen Hyatt went on his kind of record-breaking pace at Tennessee. He was always going to be a slow start because he was coming off surgery when he got to the NFL. And he played through training camp. But last year, I mean, it's so hard to evaluate any wide receiver on the Browns because of how bad the quarterbacking has been. And then he didn't see a ton of action with Joe Flacco. But, I mean, he's 2 straight weeks he's produced the moment Jameis Winston has come in. And for better or for worse, everywhere Jameis Winston has been, the one thing he does is he feeds the best receivers on that team, going back to Tampa Bay with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, going to his short stint in New Orleans. I mean,
Chris Olave was amazing every game Jameis Winston played.
And I do think that's a sign of at least an average backup quarterback where they're like, well, I know where the money's made. And right now it's Cedric Tillman, and he's outproducing Jerry Jeudy, who has significantly higher draft capital and significantly higher hype around him. And he's done better than Elijah Moore, who still has flex-worthy appeal right now.
Elijah Moore is going to be just getting open in the abyss every week for the rest of time. Let's just stick in Cleveland here then and jump right into the trick or treat segment and skip ahead to Nick Chubb, Dalton. So Nick Chubb, trick or treat, that Nick Chubb is an every week starter at the running back position moving forward.
I would treat. I think he is.
Me too.
If you go and you look at his snap share, he's still getting worked in. He was 37% 2 weeks ago, 52% last week. And now the offense looks functional, and that's good for Nick Chubb. I haven't seen him actually be his explosive self, and I don't know if we're going to really get that coming off the ACL tear. But
no, but I do think he looked better last week than his first week. And so it's hard to really say what the ceiling is or is not on what he might look like as the year goes on.
Yes. But it's pretty clear to me that he's the best running back in this offense through weeks 1 through 6. Non-Nick Chubb running backs in this offense had a negative rush rate over expectation. They also had the highest stuff percentage in the NFL. Some of that you can lean on the offensive line, but Cleveland's going to be looking for a good running game. It's been a clear part of a Stefanski offense. Their play action and boot teams. So the Nick Chubb hype train, I think, is going to get higher every week. The guy is still put up some of the best seasons we've seen from running back. And even if he's not giving you that, he's a weekly top 24 running back as soon as he's getting that 70 to 80% part of the share that I think they're easing him back into. And I think we'll see him up in the 60s or 70s this week.
Yeah, and this actually shocked me when I looked this up earlier today. Would you believe that he's actually the only running back to have more than 50 yards rushing against the Ravens this year?
No, that is crazy.
And the Ravens have been a really good rush defense this year, obviously. But yeah, it's like Nick Chubb, second week back, still getting worked in, doesn't look like himself, not a great offensive line, and he had the best yardage day of anybody on the Ravens so far this year, which, again, not a super high bar, but tough matchup, impressive for him to be able to do that so soon back. 71 of his 74 rushing yards this year are after contact. He has a pretty good matchup in the Rams this week. So we're going to learn a lot more, I think, about what Nick Chubb may or may not be. Obviously, he could still improve physically down the stretch. But if we get a really good Nick Chubb game this week, I know it's a good matchup, might not be that good every week, but if he looks good, the stats are good, I think it's probably going to be Nick Chubb to the moon. After this week, people are going to be really, really excited about it, maybe overly so. I don't know, but I am in on Nick Chubb, despite the raw box score numbers not being super great this year so far through 2 games. But again, the Ravens have been a really good rush defense and a really bad pass defense. And this offense goes from unusable to at least functional with some promise. And I mean, Nick Chubb is just one of those guys that you kind of just have to keep betting on because he should not be out there playing the way he's playing a year removed from that injury, probably. I mean, we argued about Jonathan Brooks and when he might be back and what the updates meant and all of that. Even I'm surprised that Nick Chubb is back multiple weeks before Jonathan Brooks. Now, Brooks got hurt later in the year, but Nick Chubb's injury was much more catastrophic than Jonathan Brooks.
He was squatting 600 pounds in like August, which it's not the same as playing football, but his recovery and the fact that he's like a gym dog could definitely be part of how he's going to come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, back to the beginning of the list, back to what I think is the biggest story in the NFL right now. That is Anthony Richardson, who, I mean, things did not go well for on Sunday. Things have not gone well for him this season. And now, Dalton, Joe Flacco is the quarterback. And according to Shane Steichen, it's for the foreseeable future. I guess just trick or treat, we are going to see, or we won't see Anthony Richardson again the rest of the season, barring health for Joe Flacco, obviously.
I'm going trick. I think it's going to happen. Couple of weird internet observations here. First and foremost, none of the players, none of the leaders in the locker room knew he was going to get benched. Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Zaire Franklin, none of them were told. They learned through social media. The only time that, from what Colts Twitter is telling me, because I'm very active on Colts Twitter, thanks to how much I love Anthony Richardson, the only time this has happened that they can find is when Jeff Saturday became the interim head coach, which was clearly a move by their GM, Jim Irsay, who is in a buddy system. Shane Steichen is likely doing this in part for his job. I don't think it's a good move for an organization no matter what. This is a Colts team that, since the loss of Andrew Luck, has played this quarterback carousel with old veteran quarterbacks. Sometimes found the playoffs, sometimes they haven't found success.
Well, and that might be. I mean, it could be Irsay. It could also be Ballard, and this could be Ballard. Like, I saw someone make this point today because people were complaining about, there's just no, like, it's almost impossible to develop a quarterback in the NFL now, and that is partially because guys get fired quicker and quicker now than they used to. So it's really hard to take your lumps and develop that quarterback, or to not start the guy you drafted right away, which in reality, Richardson probably was a guy who needed to learn behind a veteran for at least a little bit, and he was handed the reins very quickly, obviously, when he got there. So I think it could very easily be the GM trying to save his job. But bottom line is, this seems like, based on the response today, that this maybe came from above Shane Steichen's head, which is never something that is healthy for any locker room, I don't think.
Yeah, and this was a team that didn't go out and make major additions in free agency. They didn't add to their depleted cornerback room or safety room, despite the fact that there were multiple safeties on the market up until the very end. So that's concerning, that it looks like they're trying to play for something, even though I don't think this was a season where they were going to be in competition unless Anthony Richardson came out and had a rather insane, like CJ Stroud rookie year, because that's basically what this was. Secondly, CJ Stroud is 6 months Anthony Richardson is 6 months younger than Carson Beck, who's not in the NFL. He's 2 years younger than Drake May, and he's the same age as Caleb Williams, who's a rookie. So this was never going to be an easy ride, and I don't think anybody ever promised that.
Well, and he has, I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I know Cam Ward was one of the guys on the list. I'm pretty sure Carson Beck was on the list, and there was somebody else in college where not age, but maybe it was Shedeur Sanders, but in his NFL and college starts, add those up, he still has fewer starts than a lot of college quarterbacks, a lot of the top prospects in the upcoming draft. So he is extremely inexperienced, and we knew that coming in.
Yeah, and I think it's important to evaluate Richardson as a passer because he hasn't been great. But 12.9% of his pass attempts have resulted in breakups. There's no other quarterback in the NFL who has a higher rate than 10%. The Colts pass catchers are third worst in the NFL in separation. They're only generating 3.2 yards of separation. That's from the NFL Pro subscription. Not to say he's been a great passer or he's otherworldly, but I don't think he's as bad as his 44% completion percentages. And there are also in the NFL, maybe 4 or 5 other quarterbacks who could do the deep throws that he does, which he's highly accurate on. Now, those aren't going to win you games, but the other problem I have is the team that they did this against. The Houston Texans have been one of the best defenses against quarterbacks this year.
Yeah.
They held Caleb Williams to 20 of 34, 134 yards and 2 interceptions. Josh Allen had almost the exact same stat line that Anthony Richardson had against the Texans. This year, they're allowing 180 passing yards on them as a defense. Like, this defense has been really, really good against quarterbacks. And part of this is the optics. Richardson really messed up, telling people that he took himself out of the game. He was tired.
Yeah, I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was. It's like, dude, maybe it was Micah Parsons. It's like, dude, just lie. Like, don't say it's because you were tired.
And again, he's a young guy, and he's just going out there and he's just telling people exactly like what he thinks, and that is what it is. But all in all, I think it's a terrible thing for the organization. I think if you were still starting him in fantasy, you really committed to the bit, because I stopped starting him a couple of weeks ago. I'm one of the biggest Richardson lovers out there, and I do think this is like this could be a full season benching, because Joe Flacco's not bad, but I don't think it's going to do anything for the organization if they eke into the playoffs as a 9-7 team and lose in the first round to a team that's actually good.
So now I forgot what you said. You said that you do think we're going to see Richardson again this year?
No, I don't think so. Not unless they're out of playoff contention.
You don't think so? I actually do. I'm going, this is a trick. I do think we're going to see Richardson at some point again this year. Obviously, even if Flacco is healthy. And, you kind of said it. Yes, it's a terrible look tapping out of the game on third down, even if it's third and long in the red zone in a winnable game in this. I think it was third quarter, so it wasn't even like the fourth quarter of the game. And I do know that his ground covered on scrambles was up there with like Mahomes against Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl. So he did do a lot in the game.
Did you also see what the play was before?
Well, I haven't actually visually seen it. I've just seen it described.
Tackle for the Bucs jumped on Richardson's back, and Richardson threw him off. Of course he's going to be tired. And then they come out, and I don't know what they're running, but I can't blame the guy for being a little tired and checking himself out of the game. I just wouldn't have said that. If I'm missing work because I stayed up all night drinking, I'm not telling my boss I'm hungover. I'm saying I'm sick. That's it.
Okay, Dalton's boss, if you heard that, you know exactly what happened in a couple months.
I was actually out Thursday and Friday and Monday because I drink heavily every night before.
But I mean, the bottom line really is he went 10 for 32. He actually started 2 of 16. So he went 8 of 16, which is still not good, but drastically improved his numbers. I know there were drops, but there were also bad throws that we saw in there. And we've seen, to be frank, we've seen inaccurate throws, bad decisions. We've seen all of those things. We've also seen drops. We've seen receivers maybe not getting open like they should, but we've seen not good quarterback play for Richardson so far. 7 interceptions in the 5 full games that he's played. He had a game where he got hurt really early. That was the only game where he was above a 50% completion percentage this year, which is kind of funny.
Actually looking good in that game too.
In the Steelers game,
the 1 yard line.
Yeah, he was 3 of 4 in that game. When they beat Miami 16-10 2 weeks ago, he had more rush attempts than completions, 14-10. So it just has not been good in the passing game. But I do still think, well, number one, I don't think Flacco is going to be good enough to keep them in the play. I think they're going to be on the outside looking in of the playoff picture, and I think that's going to give them the opening to get Richardson back in there. So I guess if I have a really deep bench, I could see holding on to him. Otherwise, though, I still even if you do think he's going to come back, I still think you have to drop him. You can't hold him unless you are in a pretty deep league or like a dynasty situation. Obviously, you're not.
Or you're in super flex and there's nothing on the waivers. But
yeah, that's another situation too. Okay, from one young struggling quarterback to another less struggling but coming off a bad game quarterback is Caleb Williams. He just went 10 of 24 after having back-to-back pretty darn good weeks where he scored 24 and 30 fantasy points, just 9 points last week. Trick or treat. Caleb Williams is a startable fantasy quarterback the rest of the way. And I am actually going trick with this for as much as I believe in Caleb Williams, the player, the prospect, and I like a lot of what I've seen from him as an NFL quarterback. And he obviously had very good moments as a fantasy quarterback there for a couple weeks. Those were in really good matchups. And I kind of think he's a matchup dependent boom or bust QB2. He's a guy that in a bye week pinch, you can start. In an injury pinch, you can start. But there are 15 other quarterbacks I think you should probably be looking at before Caleb Williams. But I do just want to say, because I think anytime you talk about a young quarterback like this, even if we're like, I'm dismissing him as a legitimate fantasy option, I want to make it pretty clear that I still, number one, I believe in him long-term as a fantasy option and just as NFL quarterback. I think those things kind of get mashed together sometimes. So an interesting stat I found for him, one thing for Mahomes that has actually been a calling card this year is how good he's been in fourth quarters, despite struggles throughout the rest of the games and the rest of the game and a lot of points this season. Mahomes, I think, was first in QBR in the fourth quarter entering last week. Caleb Williams is kind of following that same path of playing his best football in the biggest moments. He's 39 of 60 for 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick in the fourth quarter this year. You can see him making plays, extending plays. You even saw a little bit of that last week in a game where he did not play well. I think he's good. I think for fantasy, he's just a little bit off the radar right now. And I think a very big part of that is the aforementioned coaching situation in Chicago. Like Shane Waldron, I'm just disgusted in what he's done with this offense. I mean, handing it off to an offensive lineman in a crucial situation like that. And then just overall, the Bears are not a well-coached unit, which is obvious when one of your guys is not paying attention on the last play of the game and talking to the crowd. And of course, that is how the Hail Mary gets completed. So just kind of looking at quarterbacks and where they are now, it's actually kind of funny. He's averaging by 0.1, but still averaging more points per game than Mahomes right now. He's ahead of Rodgers. He's ahead of Stroud. I think you still trust Mahomes and Stroud over him. Dak is also basically in that same neighborhood. I think I'm trusting Dak too, but like Trevor Lawrence, I think I'm probably taking Caleb Williams given the injuries in Jacksonville. I'm definitely taking him over Aaron Rodgers, but he's in that like mid QB2 range for me right now.
Yeah, and I went trick here as well, but I agree with you. He is like a mid QB2 and a player I've gotten excited about. I did see a lot of people say like Caleb Williams is lucky Anthony Richardson had this day, because Caleb Williams' day against Washington was pretty bad for the most
It was bad, but like he's a young quarterback in his rookie year. These guys are going to have games like this. I mean, CJ Stroud, who I think it was more about the offensive line than him, but he had a horrendous game against the Packers 2 weeks ago.
They won the game with it. He had 86 passing yards.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, like going back to those fantasy finishes he had, it was against Jacksonville and Carolina. They're the 31st, 32nd worst passing defenses in the NFL. I'm not saying like it's bad on Williams for performing against them, but he has much stiffer competition coming up, and I wouldn't expect those performances. If I'm in a 2 QB league, he's definitely a guy I'm starting as my second quarterback every week, unless I have a monster squad. But yeah, it's like the meme where there's 3 people aiming a gun at each other, and there's a guy in the pews aiming a gun, and the guy in the pews is Shane Waldron, and everybody in the stands is every fantasy asset on this team, because we were worried about the wide receiver room cannibalizing each other, and worried about the running back rotation cannibalizing each other. And it turns out the only person cannibalizing anybody's production is Shane Waldron's play calling, which has been horrendous this season.
Yeah, and on a separate note, I would just really like to see Rome Odunze get more involved. I mean, the first read target share, which has been a stat, a contested stat in real NFL circles as compared to fantasy NFL circles, but he was number one the last couple of weeks of first read target share. But like, I don't know if he ran an absolutely sick route the other day that I think I don't know if I sent you or not, but he just still looks the part. I would love to see him get more involved down the stretch and like get DJ more the ball. I kind of don't care if we throw it to Keenan Allen very much. Like, can we get the other two guys the ball, please?
Let's just stop with the Cole Kmet tight end screens.
Yeah. Oh,
it's a wild opinion. Cole Kmet's a good tight end, but I think we have 3 talented wide receivers who could use the ball more.
Also, DeAndre Swift, great in the screen game.
Maybe Khalil Herbert plays slot receiver. I don't know. Just throwing ideas out there.
Okay, Bo Nix. I just kind of thought we haven't talked about Bo Nix really much this year, other than absolutely crapping on him after week 1 because it was that bad after week 1. But he has been really good from a fantasy perspective and even kind of good from a real life perspective the last couple of weeks, Dalton. I mean, is he a starting quarterback rest of season? Trick or treat?
I hate that I did this, but I went with treat.
And me too. It's one of those where I don't like fully believe in the player, but just the production from a fantasy standpoint is kind of undeniable right now.
Yes, and this is where we really have to separate. Like Anthony Richardson, bad fantasy results, bad football results. Those are the same. Bo Nix, good fantasy results, bad football results.
I would say the last month it's been mediocre football results. He did just play the Panthers, who obviously we just talked about how bad it's been. The Broncos have not had that tough a schedule. Not that the Chiefs, if he does bad against the Chiefs, it's like, oh, well, he sucks. But I am interested. Like, if he plays well against the Chiefs, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe we really do have something in Bo Nix, the player, here too.
Well, I'll give the good first. So he's the second highest ADOT in the NFL among starters if you include Anthony Richardson. If you take Anthony Richardson out, he's the highest ADOT. He is throwing deep balls. He also has proven that he has a rushing floor, which isn't what I don't think anybody expected.
I mean, the last 4 games, he has 155 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, and he's been running all season, really, too. I think he's on pace for like 550 yards and 9 rushing touchdowns or something like that is what I just saw the other day.
Yeah, and for me, if you're stuck in like the Geno Smith, Stafford, Kirk Cousins kind of streaming quarterback tier, that's where Bo Nix is viable. He's not viable with like the top 7 quarterbacks. My concern is that he's doing 2 things we didn't see him do in his very long collegiate career, which is throw the ball deep and run the ball a lot. And I just don't know how sustainable those things are in this offense long term and whether or not they keep up. He's played out of his mind, but he, in my opinion, is like a real boom bust starting option for you because his floor is like 7 points, and we've seen that. But he has 28-point games because he runs the ball on the ground, and in the end zone, he really does become like one of their primary options at getting it in the end zone.
He's honestly a guy where, and again, this isn't even me saying, like I said, it's a treat. I do think rest of season, I probably would rank him inside my top 12 quarterbacks. With that said, I agree with you where that if the rushing just completely goes away in any one game, you could see the floor drop out from under you passing wise, and he could have that 7-point game. And then as we get down the stretch this season, you think about the fantasy playoffs. It's why we kind of we talk about like towards the end of the season, if you have the depth to trade for those stud quarterbacks, if you can, don't extend yourself to do it. Don't make a bad deal to do it, but it is an advantage to have that advantage at the quarterback position, that security. And Nix is a guy that, he could easily tank your fantasy playoff matchup. So I think if I had Bo Nix, even though I'm a believer in top 12 rest of season, because of that weekly floor fear, he'd be a guy where if you have him, you may have another quarterback who you like about the same. I would be very much in on trading Bo Nix for help for the rest of my roster if such a deal were to exist for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say he plays the Colts, the Chargers, and the Bengals in the fantasy playoffs.
That's pretty good. That is
really exciting for what we're talking about here, where he is kind of a matchup dependent QB.
When's their second Chiefs matchup?
It's the last game of the season.
Oh, the last game. So if you play a full 18-game fantasy slate, that could be your fantasy championship. So keep that in mind.
And that would be a problem, I think.
Yeah, it'd be a problem for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, don't play your fantasy championship in the last week of the regular season. Okay, next guy up. just a lot of guys on this list today who we have spoke illy of in the past. Dalton, Tank Bigsby. Trick or treat, Tank Bigsby is the Jacksonville Jaguar running back you want to start rest of season. His last 4 games, 25 points, 2.4 points, 24 points, 8.6 points. 2 of those without ETN, and at least one, maybe both of those other 2 were with ETN leaving the game early.
Yeah, I wouldn't trick here, mostly because I don't believe there is.
We're too much on the same page. I hope we disagree more down the stretch here.
I just don't think there is a running back you want to start right now. Tank Bigsby in positive game scripts has been really good. The moment Jacksonville is down, he has been really bad. Both of those 8.4 and 4-point games came in games where they were down for the entire second, third, and fourth quarter.
Yeah, he's not trusted in the passing game yet.
No.
And that's even with Diontae Johnson back there instead of Travis Etienne, who like one of the things that has helped Etienne, it's been touchdowns and it's been receiving work. Has helped the fact that he has not gotten going on the ground really at all this year. Even though he actually does have a pretty high explosive run rate, he also has a very high negative run rate, which kind of checks out with what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and it's concerning for any of these running backs, especially ones so reliant on rushing production to get going when the Jacksonville Jaguars just traded their starting left tackle, who's been very good. Cam Robinson's been very good for a while. And all in all, it's just not a good setup for this running game to be successful because, like we said earlier, this is the 31st worst defense against the pass. They're going to give up points every week. They're going to keep giving up points every week. And when they get in those positions, Tank Bigsby is not an option until they get into the red zone. And now you're relying on Trevor Lawrence, sans Christian Kirk, maybe sans Brian Thomas for a while.
I was going to say, it sounds like Brian Thomas is out for 2 to 4 weeks, I think is the timeline that we saw, right?
I don't know if you saw the MRI came back negative and there was no damage. He practiced today. And the beat reporter for Jacksonville said that the ESPN national reporter had it wrong and that he could play this week. Anyways.
Well, that would be great because, the offense would really be hurting without both of those receivers. Although you can spend some – you can
check downs.
You can spend some of that and say they're really going to have to count on both these running backs, which they probably will down the stretch anyway. But I'm also going trick here. I mean, I just kind of need to see what it looks like with Travis Etienne and with Etienne actually healthy and not leaving these games. I want to see what the split actually looks like because at every opportunity, and now Doug Peterson could be full of shit, but at every opportunity, Doug Peterson has refused to say Tank Bigsby is their guy and has gone out of his way to say Travis Etienne is their guy. Is that smart? I don't know. Is that what's going to happen? I don't know. But I do know Tank Bigsby has played like he could be the guy. He's forced missed tackles on 34% of his carries. That's second in the NFL to only Kenneth Walker. He's first in yards per carry or yards after contact per carry at 4.6. He's been very, very good running the ball this year. But I want everybody to keep in mind that Travis Etienne was also very good running the ball last year. He's not had a great start this year, but I've seen some film work, some Matt Wallman work on Twitter that has shown some plays where it's like, oh, this play got blocked up. Great for Tank Bigsby. This play did not get blocked up at all for Travis Etienne. I think there was a little bit of that happening as well. Obviously, Bigsby has played really well too. I don't want to take anything away from him, but I need to see what it looks like for multiple weeks before I'm ready to say that either of these guys has the edge right now.
Yeah, well, it's hard in season to remember there are blips every fantasy season. Like there was a time 4 years ago where people thought Travis Fulgham was going to be like a wide receiver one, and he fizzled out after 4 games. And like Puka Nakua's start last year is the opposite of it, where people didn't buy in quick enough on a guy who ended up being elite. But I will say there is a body of work already around Tank Bigsby, and he was absolutely terrible last year. Not to say a player can't get better, but we do know Travis Etienne through 3 seasons has been a productive running back. He's not been an elite running back, but he's been very productive, and he can play both levels of the game in passing and rushing. And that's something we haven't seen from Tank Bigsby. So all in all, I don't really want to start any of these guys on a weekly basis.
As I said, there is a world where these guys are both good enough that neither one is actually usable for fantasy because we hate this offense.
Yeah, and that's where I land. I don't think any of them I'm recommending starting any week. But if I have to choose, and I know Etienne's healthy, I'm going to pick Etienne most weeks.
Yep. Okay. Diontae Johnson is an every week starter in Baltimore. Yes, Baltimore. Diontae Johnson has been traded since last we talked. I feel like this might finally be a divergence here. I'm going trick. Dalton, what are you saying?
I really thought we would diverge.
Oh, you're going trick too? Man.
So
see, like, I think this trade, it kind of keeps Diontae the same, which is he's kind of on the fringe of starter. You can put him in there, but you're also happy to bench him a lot of weeks, I think. And really what this trade does is, well, number one, it kills Rashad Bateman. I think his ears are still ringing from how hard the football bounced off his face because he lost it in the sun the other day. Hurts Zay Flowers a little bit, although I think Zay Flowers is good enough to where this isn't like killing Zay Flowers, but it does hurt him a little bit. And then it's like you throw your hands up with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, who played a lot of snaps together. And also, this has not been a great environment for the pass game all year, despite how good Lamar Jackson has been. Zay Flowers, he's had a good year, but he's been really up and down, has multiple games with like 2-3 points, 1-2 receptions because they've been so freaking good running the ball. So I think you just think about the potential teams that Diontae could have gone to and where he ended up. From a real football perspective, this is great. From a fantasy perspective, I'm a little bit bummed out and think this is just kind of a bummer for most of the guys involved outside of Lamar, who this will obviously help be more efficient in the pass game, despite me kind of wondering why two teams have now given away Diontae Johnson for close to free at this point.
See, and that's my concern. So let me get, obviously, both Evan and I are some of the biggest Diontae Johnson stands. Everything about the player screams that he's really good. Really concerning. Steelers were willing to give him up and basically run out George Pickens and nobody. I mean, Darnell Washington might be their second leading receiver. Don't fact check me on that, but I feel like that's possible. And Carolina, who I get their season's in a rebuild, but Diontae Johnson's on a 2-year contract. He's not on a 1-year contract. And he was traded for a 6th-round pick and a guy who's still young enough that
not just a 6th-round pick. It's a swap where I think it was actually it was for a 5th-round pick, but they sent out a 6th, and it's basically going to be like they trade up 10, 15 spots in the draft is what it's going to end up being.
That's weird, especially considering older, probably not as good right now, DeAndre Hopkins, which the Chiefs, for what is essentially more value.
Rental.
If you're doing a trade chart,
too.
Yeah. But if you're doing a trade chart here, Diontae went for less, and that doesn't track if your GM knows football.
One thing I am interested.
Carolina Panthers GM know football.
No, I don't think so.
Not.
Does the owner know football? Probably most importantly, and no, he does not. But yeah, it's like they started Bryce Young last week. They're starting him again next week, and they're just willing to give away Diontae Johnson for free. Okay. One thing I am really interested in with Baltimore is one thing Diontae does not really do is run block. One thing that Baltimore does do a lot is run the ball. Just curious how that's going to mesh. This is not just a Carolina thing. This is a Pittsburgh issue as well.
Yeah. So if I have him, I'm holding him because genuinely now, factually, no matter what anybody says, this is the best quarterback play he's going to have his career.
Yep.
Yes, the wide receiver room is a little more crowded, but the Baltimore defense has been really shaky all season, giving up a lot of yards. This team has clearly committed to the pass when they're down. Derrick Henry hardly sees the field when they're down. Mm-hmm. I think there are positive game scripts coming. I'm not starting him for like 2 weeks probably until I see something because I don't think this week we're going to see much. Next week, we might see a little more. Also, this week, they get a Denver Broncos defense that's going to make things even shakier. Yeah. But I'm not ready to start him. I really believe in the player. It's getting really hard to not question something's wrong with the player when teams keep giving up on him.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly something going on behind the scenes that we just don't know. And that could kind of like with Richardson, too. Those are two things where it's like, it's just impossible for us to have the correct, completely nuanced take because we do not know everything happening in these buildings and these two situations. Okay.
My undrafted free agent darling, Jimmy Coker, has shown up so well.
Yeah.
They don't need Diontae Johnson. And Couple of fun facts. I tweeted about Jalen Coker in March. His mom liked my tweet.
I remember this.
Basically knows who I am. Number 2.
How could you drop him off your dynasty fantasy team then?
He's on my
Unreal.
team. Fun fact 2. Out of every skill position undrafted free agent, Jalen Coker got the largest salary that was equivalent to an undrafted free agent quarterback salary at $225,000.
Yeah, he wouldn't have gone undrafted if he didn't get hurt at the Shrine Bowl. Seems to be the consensus. So he probably should not have been undrafted, and he's proving that right now.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Jalen Coker.
Okay, Jaden Reed, a guy that we have both been very big fans of, but has been making me a little sad the last couple of weeks. Dalton, trick or treat, Jaden Reed is a top 12 wide receiver rest of season, so can't take into account his big week 1. But from this point forward, is he a top 12 fantasy wide receiver?
I would trick. So,
man, I'm going to be really mad if we go 10 for 10 on agreeing here.
We're in alignment here. What I have come to decide with how I feel about Jaden Reed right now is he is like prime Will Fuller. But
okay, I take a lot of offense to that.
but he can get much better. Like, he has a lot more left to his game to improve on, and he's not at the height of his career, but he is like the ultimate boomer bust wide receiver right now, where his utilization is weird. And then you have the situation going on in Green Bay where I don't think Jordan Love has been healthy since week 1, and it's definitely impacting how they're doing that pass game. At halftime, they asked LaFleur how Jordan Love was doing, and he said he can't really move. And then he came out there, played a little more, and Malik Willis came in. He's supposed to start. I don't think he should be starting. This is really akin to a lot of the, not excuses, but reasons we gave for Trevor Lawrence's struggles in the second half last year. Is every week Jordan Love is on the injury report, and he's not able to get going because of that. And it really does impact their passing game. But then you have Malik Willis in, and I don't know if you saw this, but on the final play of the game against Jacksonville, there was a wheel route to Jaden Reed. And they asked about it, and they drew it up on the sideline. Jaden Reed executed it perfectly, caught the ball, won the game.
Yeah, because my entire Twitter timeline was like, oh, you just discovered the wheel route for Jaden Reed a year and a half into having him. How cool.
So I don't think he's a top 12. He's a weekly bust start, in my opinion. But I'm insulating him with like lower ceiling, higher floor guys, probably, if I'm like really jerry-rigging my lineup here, so that his 3-point games don't cost me a week. But those 35-point weeks you don't want on your bench.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest the Jordan Love health stuff and just the Malik Willis of it all are definitely factors. I think the biggest thing right now still is he is not used as much as his talent indicates that he probably should be in this offense still. And I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, since week 2, he's the wide receiver 18. So that, I mean, I hate to be the take away his best game guy, but I do think that
to take away his best game.
Yeah, but to take away his best, I think that's been a little more indicative of what he's been so far this year, is like more of a top 20 guy instead of, I think he's still inside the top 10 off of that giant week 1 game, which was a great game. He is capable of doing that any given week, like you said. But his last 2 weeks, he's been in single digits. Romeo Doubs throws a fit, and all of a sudden, it's Romeo Doubs, 25% target share, Jaden Reed, 18% the last 3 weeks. And Reed actually has been 18% now for the entire season, and he's still at just a 77% route participation. Those are just not up to snuff with other guys in the top 12 receiver range. I think he's so talented that he's going to have those big boom weeks, and he's going to be a guy you want to start and a wide receiver too. Like the passer rating for the quarterback when targeting Jaden Reed is number 1 in the NFL at 141 this year. He's a great player, a very quarterback-friendly player, and the Packers, I think, need to get him the ball in more ways. But we are a year and a half into this thing, and it still is not happening on a consistent basis right now. So I think we have to adjust a little bit our expectations based off of the nuclear week 1 that he had.
I'm sure Robert Saleh calling plays will really fix things for them.
Tank Dell, Dalton. Obviously, Tank Dell, a topic of conversation because Stephon Diggs tears his ACL, out for the year. Nico Collins out, I think, for 1 more week, hopefully back after that. But in the meantime, Tank Dell, top 20 receiver rest of season, trick or treat. And keep in mind, we talked about all off season long. Hey, these Houston guys, you want to draft them because if one of them goes down, it's great for the other two. And turns out if Nico Collins goes down, it hasn't been great for the other two. But if it's Nico and Tank, can it be great for Tank?
So I would trick, and please don't tell me what trick.
Keep going.
And at least until Nico's back is my caveat, because I don't know. The reports don't look like they're bona fide that he'll be back next week based on what I was reading. My second concern here is he's not a wide receiver one. And then my final concern, and this was the concern I had in the preseason, is for this offense to hit, we needed CJ Stroud to be really good. And CJ Stroud really hasn't been really good all season. He is middling in the pack in yards per attempt. His wide receivers have the third best open rate. In spite of that, they have the 12th best on target rate. So he's not hitting open receivers as frequently as you would like to see. None of this is to say he's bad, but it is to say this team is not the juggernaut offensively it was last year. And it's hard for me to put Tank Dell top 20, especially if he's the only wide receiver starting in this room, because I don't think he has the chops to be a wide receiver one, face those coverages, run those routes. And secondly, I mean, this team is just living on the ground. They're running the ball frequently. Their offensive line is a good run blocking unit. They have been a abysmal pass blocking unit, and I don't really expect that to change going into the season. And Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator, has been pretty committed to running the ball on early downs. So all of those things, I think there are better options in the top 20. He's still a flex for me. I'd flex him weekly, but I definitely don't want him in my top 20 receivers.
I'm going against my better judgment here, I think, and I am saying treat for this one for a couple of reasons. And this is kind of a weird reason, perhaps, but it's actually a little bit of a relief to me to see his reception perception profile and see that Tank Dell himself has just not had a very good start to the season. These are weeks 2, 3, and 6 that have been sampled. I think the first 2 weeks were pretty tough matchups. One of them was the Bears. I don't remember who the week 3 opponent was. But keep in mind, and Harmon mentions this in the profile, I mean, Tank Dell was shot in the leg in the offseason. So a slow start, not exactly crazy. Like he just his success rates have not been up to snuff for what they were last year. So that just gives me hope that, hey, if the player can get back on track, and I do think he actually looked pretty good last week. He made some big plays down the stretch of that game to seal it for him. I think if the player can get on track and if the offensive line can block some, but that's really been the biggest issue has been the pass protection for CJ Stroud. If they could just get the passing game on track, I think Nico's going to be back probably next week, it seems like, but I guess we'll see. But I am going to kind of go out on a limb and say that the Texans are going to get it together in the air game, and I do think Tank Dell is going to be a top 20 guy rest of season because I think that he himself looked a little bit better last week and probably will continue the round in the form a little bit because, again, he was shot in the leg in the offseason.
Big for the does getting shot hurt you index. I'm just looking at expert consensus rankings, some guys around him. Chris Olave or Tank Dell?
I'll take Olave.
Josh Downs with Joe Flacco or Tank Dell?
Tank Dell.
Interesting. Amari Cooper or Tank Dell?
Tank Dell.
Interesting. Lad McConkey or Tank Dell?
Tank Dell.
Interesting. I would take those guys all over him. But
yeah, I like that we finally diverged there. Okay, 2 tight ends. We can try and get through these somewhat quickly to get out in an hour 10. Let's start with Travis Kelce. Dalton, trick or treat, Travis Kelce should be back in the number 1 overall tight end consideration rest of season.
Yeah, treat. I mean, tight end position is really 3 guys, in my opinion, right now. It's Kittle, Bowers, Kelce. And then, like, it gets really ugly. We'll talk about him later. Kyle Pitts is there. Mark Andrews is having a resurgence. It's just an ugly position right now. The difference is Travis Kelce, when needed, commands an elite target share that nobody else, except for maybe Brock Bowers, is even doing. And he is in an offense, so this for 2 years straight, I expect to get back on track sometime soon and figure things out. And they just added DeAndre Hopkins, and it's just a really good complement to each other. They're both good at finding space. It's going to make these defenses have to play things, and one of them are going to be the beneficiary of how the other one is playing. And I think that that's positive. Overall, he should be in it. He's still one of the best tight ends in football, if not the best, and he still is tied to the best quarterback in football.
If you had to predict who's going to be the tight end one, because this question was consideration, not saying he is or is not the tight end one necessarily, do you still give George Kittle the nod? Because I still give George Kittle the advantage, I think, to be the tight end one from this point forward. I mean, Ayuk banged up. We know what the splits are when one or two of those guys have not been playing for George Kittle. But I think Kelsey is going to be right there. And I do think maybe for us, that's not bold to say, but I think just in general, that is a bold thing to say because he is still like outside the top 10 or right around top 10 in season long ranks. But here's the thing. Or I guess before I go on my rant, who would you have, Kittle or Kelsey, just from this point forward, tight end one?
I would still have Kittle.
He's averaging like 17 points a game.
Yeah, in all but one game, he has double-digit points, and that's consistency you're just not really getting around the league right now.
Yeah.
And like you said, he's just so involved in the offense without Ayuk.
Yeah. So since Rashee Rice went down, Kelsey is on pace for 128 catches for 1,131 yards, and he finally caught his first touchdown the other day, so that's exciting. And those splits even include a game where he goes 4 for 17 against the 49ers, where the Chiefs obviously, are shorthanded at receiver already. Juju Smith-Schuster gets hurt, one of the first plays of the game, and it's just we knew as soon as Juju pulled up, we knew, okay, this is going to be a grind for the Chiefs to be able to move the ball at all, really, in this game because they're going to really key in on Travis Kelce. And a couple things here. Number one, I mean, he has one touchdown this year. The Chiefs are like third in the NFL with 10 rushing touchdowns. We've seen a lot of going down on the 1 to 5 yard line. Part of that is because the Chiefs don't really get explosive plays, but also part of that is just probably bad luck. We'll see what happens there the rest of the season, but I would expect Kelce to have more than like 2 or 3 touchdowns for the entire season. So that'll bring up his profile too. I do think that Hopkins coming in helps him a lot. I mean, you saw it on the touchdown that they actually put the two of them on the same side, and the safety had to decide, okay, am I going to go with Hopkins? Am I going to go help on Kelce? And he kind of did neither, and Kelce ended up getting a touchdown. Hopkins was also open on the play. And I think that the Mahomes is playing terribly with the Chiefs are undefeated narrative has gone a little bit too far at this point. He started off the season playing not well by his standards, but still pretty good by NFL quarterback standards. I think this last couple of games, for the most part, he actually has played really well. And I think really people are kind of tricking themselves with the 8 touchdown to 9 interception split. I just said it. The passing touchdowns have been a little low, a little bit to a kind of a fluky degree. And then, I mean, the last 3 games, his interceptions are a tipped ball in his own end zone against the Raiders that got picked. One caught by a defensive tackle where he tipped it and caught it. One where Xavier Worthy fell down where he would have been open, maybe had he not, or it definitely would not have been picked. And then one where Juju Smith-Schuster dropped a touchdown pass that then got intercepted on a great play by Colin Saunders. So, like, the interceptions are not Mahomes making these terrible decisions. They are kind of going back to the 2022, or maybe that was just last. Now I can't. Whichever year he was throwing, maybe it was 2021. Mahomes has had a couple years where there's been like a lot of fluky through the hands or tips or whatever interceptions, and this has kind of been another one of those so far. I think he's been playing well. All of the offensive numbers for the Chiefs are starting to kind of perk up a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and I think Hopkins himself looked very good. I'm feeling pretty good about where this offense is at, and of course, where Travis Kelce is at, who I believe is tight end 7 in points per game over the last month, and that is despite a game where he did almost nothing against the 49ers. So I do expect Kelce to be right there for number 1. I would put him ahead of Brock Bowers, but I do still think George Kittle will win out.
Yeah. And I mean, just on the Mahomes discourse, give Joe Burrow only Jermaine Burton and a bunch of no-name wide receivers and then have him produce, or give Josh Allen only Keon Coleman and a bunch of no-name receivers and have it's just not how it works. They're down 3 weapons on the offense in 7 games. So
yeah. Okay, last guy, Dalton, Kyle Pitts, trick or treat. Kyle Pitts, top 4 tight end rest of season.
I really hate you who put this on here.
Everyone's getting really hyped about Kyle Pitts right now.
First of all, when I saw this, I was like, I just really don't care. But when I looked at it, I was like, it's a trick. Here's why. So if I were to name my top 4, I would go George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Brock Bowers. With the injury to Christian Kirk, I think Evan Ingram is above Kyle Pitts. With the way we're seeing Jameis Winston play, I put David Njoku above him. And now all of a sudden, Kyle Pitts lands at 7 on my list. But even if not, I think there is a solid 5 tight ends in front of him. Yeah. And I think all of those tight ends are very good. Trey McBride, for instance, does not have a touchdown this season, which I think is going to change in the same way you were talking about Travis Kelce. Yeah. And Evan Ingram, like, it's not going to be pretty. Like, it's not like – I think Kyle Pitts is a better player than Evan Ingram. We know at this point the way Jacksonville operates when they don't have Christian Kirk is Evan Ingram becomes check down king. Yeah. And that's just going to be the way this offense operates on an in-and-out basis with shots to Brian Thomas if he's healthy. And he's going to rack up a bunch of really ugly fantasy points. So he's not in my top 4 rest of season. He is in my top 7 rest of season.
Yeah. I agree with you. That's a trick. However, I did just want to bring it up. Well, because number one, he just had arguably his best game because he just barely scored his second touchdown against Tampa Bay the other day. Hang on to the ball, dude, while you're crossing the goal line.
Yeah. I think it was a fumble, if we're being
clear. I actually think it was too, but I got the call was a touchdown, and it was one of those the call stands type of deals. But to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, or just to kind of put into perspective how far Kyle Pitts has come from, I think he was dead to everybody through the first month of the season. He's had 65 yards in 4 straight games. He's averaging 2.71 yards per route run and 16.1 fantasy points per game. I don't know if that's half or full. This is per Scott Barrett. During this stretch, he has basically been turned into a vertical weapon instead of a horizontal weapon. This season on horizontal breaking routes, Kyle Pitts is 0.75 yards per route run, 27th at the position. On vertically breaking routes, he is 3.29 yards per route run, 2nd at the position. So while I do think this is a trick, my antenna is kind of up on, have we finally gotten to the point where we figured out how to use Kyle Pitts and it's happening? Like, I think that's not a crazy storyline to maybe play out down the stretch here with how these last couple of weeks have gone.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I'm excited if I have him or drafted him to start him the rest of the season. Mm-hmm. He's certainly a better start than a lot of the other tight ends. Like Cole Kmet was a guy getting a lot. Dallas Goedert is another guy who's pretty good to start the season. Definitely more exciting than those two. But I just think he might not be elite and a generational prospect like we all thought.
No. I, in fact, think Brock Bowers is pretty firmly proven to be a better prospect already so far. But it is at least nice to see Kyle Pitts kind of getting off the ground, and maybe he'll have a strong finish to what has been a strong couple of weeks here. Dalton, that is going to do it for episode 159 of the Half Point Per Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod, and subscribe to the YouTube Half Point Per Podcast. The link to all these things will be in the show notes. As always, the show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you all so much for listening today, and we will talk to you again next week.